The night on the colony ship was always the same, long and heavy. Engines hummed like a giant heart, walls shook with quiet vibration, and the halls were empty except for the lonely sound of metal pipes. Most workers slept, but one human stayed, awake, walking slowly through the lower decks. His name was Daniel, a repair worker, someone no one noticed, someone who lived in shadows. But this night, something unusual reached his ears. It was not the hum of engines, not the hiss of steam, not the creak of metal. It was softer, almost like a whisper. Daniel stopped, confused. He turned his head, listening again. Yes, it was real. Tiny whispers, broken words, like someone speaking into the dark. Curiosity pulled him forward. He followed the sound down the narrow passage, where lights flickered weakly and walls were stained with rust. The whispers grew clearer, yet still strange, not human, not strong, almost like the voice of someone too tired to live. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. Who would be here, in this forgotten place? He stopped in front of a broken panel. The whisper had faded, leaving silence behind. But something told him not to leave. He bent down and noticed a piece of fabric poking out from under the panel. With effort, he pulled it open, and inside, hidden in the darkness, was a small bag. Daniel looked around. No one was watching. His hands shook as he opened the bag. Inside was something he never expected, a diary. Its cover was old, scratched, and thin. The pages were worn, filled with writing in shaky letters. At first, Daniel thought it was just another worker's notes, but when he read the first page, his chest tightened. The words were not human. They were written in a simple language, broken grammar but heavy with pain. It was the diary of an alien girl. Her first words cut through Daniel's heart. I am still alive, but sometimes I wish I was not. Daniel froze. He glanced down the hall again. Silence, empty shadows. He turned back to the diary, his eyes racing across the lines. The girl wrote about hunger, about long hours of labor, about soldiers shouting at her people. She wrote about loneliness, about how others laughed at her strange face. And small body, she wrote that no one cared, not even enough to know her name. Each line was like a wound, each word heavy with sadness. Daniel felt as if he was intruding into a soul. But he could not stop reading. Page after page revealed her heart. She had no family, no friends, no safety. Her people had been conquered, forced into labor, and she was just a girl, young, fragile, with no power. But even in her pain, one thing shined through: a dream. She wrote about stars, how she wished to see them not from the dirty floor of the engine room, but from the control deck above. She dreamed of standing before the glass windows, looking at galaxies with her own eyes, but she called it impossible. She wrote, a slave cannot dream, but still my heart dreams, even if it hurts. Daniel's hands tightened around the diary. He could almost hear her voice in the words, lonely, small, and full of hope she knew would never come true. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something deep: anger, sorrow, and compassion. He wanted to find her, to ask why she still believed in dreams when the world had taken everything from her. The last page of the diary made him shiver. It said, if only someone, anyone, could make my dream real, I would believe life is not empty. Daniel closed the diary slowly, his breath heavy. He looked around once more. No one was there. But in that moment, he realized something powerful. This was not just paper, and ink. This was a voice crying in silence, a soul trapped in chains, and the girl who wrote it was still alive somewhere near. The whispers he had heard, maybe they were hers. Maybe she had been here moments before, hiding, afraid. And maybe she was still close, watching him right now. Daniel stood in the empty hall, the diary pressed to his chest. For the first time, in a long time, the cold ship felt different. It was no longer only metal and noise, it was a place where a secret heart was beating. And Daniel knew with a sudden chill that his life was about to change forever. Daniel could not sleep. The diary stayed in his hands long after his shift ended. Every page replayed in his mind, the sadness, the broken words, the impossible dream. He wondered who she was, this alien girl who wrote with such trembling hope. He wanted to see her face, to hear her voice, to know if she still believed her dream. And yet, fear filled him too. If anyone discovered he had her diary, both of them could be punished. Still, his heart whispered, "Find her." The next day, Daniel went back to work. The lower decks were filled with noise, steam, and shouting soldiers. He tried to focus, but his eyes searched the shadows. Then, near the engine room, he saw her. She was smaller than he imagined, thin, like a shadow. Her skin carried strange pale marks, her hands rough from endless work. Her clothes were torn, and her eyes, wide, dark, and tired, never lifted higher than the floor. She moved silently, sweeping metal dust. Soldiers passed by without even looking at her, as if she was less than air. Daniel's chest tightened. He knew without doubt this was the girl behind the words. He watched her from a distance, careful not to be seen. She worked quickly, nervously, as if every breath could bring punishment. But there was something else. In her, something quiet and unbroken. When the others turned away, her gaze drifted upward toward the ceiling. Daniel followed her line of sight. He realized she was looking at the stars she could not see. Her hands still swept dust. But her mind was far away, dreaming. Daniel wanted to speak to her, but his throat closed. What could he say? "I read your diary. I know your secret dream." If she trusted no one, would she trust him? And what if she told the wrong person? He forced himself to stay silent for now. That night, Daniel returned to the diary. He read the same words again, slower this time. Her sentences were broken, but her feelings were sharp. She wrote about soldiers who pushed her, called her names, made her carry heavy things until her body shook. Yet she also wrote about stars, always stars. Every page returned to her dream, as if it was her only light. Daniel closed the book and whispered into the silence, "You are not alone anymore." Days passed, and Daniel began to notice her everywhere. At mealtimes, she sat alone in the corner, nibbling crumbs as if afraid to eat too much. During work, she stayed in the shadows, careful, quiet, invisible. But sometimes Daniel caught something rare. When no one watched, her lips moved, almost smiling at her own thoughts. It was the same voice he had heard in the diary. Hope, fragile but alive. One evening, as Daniel walked the narrow hall, he heard a sound that froze him in place. Crying, it was soft, hidden but full of pain. He followed it to a storage corner, and there she was, curled against the wall, hugging her knees. Her face was wet with tears. Her body shaking. Daniel stepped back, his heart torn. He wanted to go to her, but what if she screamed? What if soldiers came? Then her voice slipped out, broken by sobs. "I want, just once, to see the stars, not as a slave, but as free." Her words cut through Daniel like a blade. It was the same line from her diary. Hearing it with his own ears made it heavier, more real. She was not only writing dreams, she was living inside them. Dreams she thought would never come true. Daniel gripped the diary hidden under his jacket. Every page burned in his mind. Every word she wrote now had a face, a voice, a trembling body in the corner. And in that moment, Daniel made a silent promise. Somehow, some way, he would make her see the stars. Not as a slave, not as a shadow, but as someone who deserved light. But promises in silence are dangerous. Daniel knew the risks. The ship was filled with guards, rules, and eyes that hated her. Kind, if anyone suspected, both their lives would end in chains or worse. Yet, as he stood there in the dark listening to her quiet sobs, he knew his life had already changed. He could not turn away now. The diary had chosen him. Her words had chosen him, and soon he would choose her. The next morning, Daniel's hands shook as he worked on loose pipes near the engine room. His eyes kept drifting toward the corner where he had seen her crying. The alien girl was there again, sweeping quietly, her head lowered, her movements small. To the soldiers, she was nothing, just another shadow. But to Daniel, she was no longer a shadow. She was a voice, a diary, a dream too fragile to die. All day, he argued with himself. Should he speak to her? Should he confess that he had read her secret diary? If he stayed silent, her dream would remain only on those pages. But if he spoke, she might scream, she might hate him, she might never trust him. Every moment of hesitation pulled him deeper into fear. Yet his heart whispered again, "Find her. Talk to her." That night the engine room grew quiet. Soldiers left for their shift change, workers drifted to their bunks. Daniel stayed behind, pretending to tighten bolts, waiting. The alien girl finished sweeping and turned to leave. Before she could disappear into the shadows, Daniel called softly. "Wait," he whispered. She froze, her back stiff, her thin hands tightening around the broom. Slowly, she turned, her wide eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked at him as if he were danger. Daniel raised his hands a little, showing he meant no harm. "I know your words," he said, his voice shaking. The girl frowned in confusion. "What? Words?" she asked softly, her accent strange, her voice almost breaking. Daniel swallowed, his chest tight. "The diary," he whispered. "I found it." Her face went pale, her body trembled. She stepped back as if struck by lightning. "No," she gasped, her voice sharp but weak. "No, not yours. You read?" Her fear stabbed Daniel's heart. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean harm. I couldn't stop reading. You had no right," she whispered fiercely, though her hands shook. Tears glistened in her eyes. "That was mine, my only place safe." Her words were full of pain, not anger. It was as if he had broken into the last corner of her soul. Daniel lowered his head. "You're right," he said quietly. "I had no right, but your words, they changed me. They hurt me. They made me see you, not as a shadow, but as someone who deserves more." Her breath caught, her lips parted. She stared at him, confused, uncertain. "You read my dream," she said in a broken whisper. "You, no, it is impossible." Daniel stepped closer, careful, gentle. "Impossible for one," he said softly, "but maybe not impossible for two." The girl's eyes widened, fear and hope battling in her gaze. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Only the hum of the ship surrounded them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice trembling. "My name is Lyra." Daniel's chest tightened. The diary had never written her name. Hearing it felt like touching something holy. He whispered it back. "Lyra." And for the first time, she did not look away. That night, in the quiet of the lower deck, they spoke in whispers. Lyra told him small pieces of her life, how she had been taken from her homeworld, how she worked without end, how she hid the diary in the walls. Daniel listened, never interrupting, his heart burning with every word. When she saw, he did not laugh, did not mock. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. For the first time in years, someone listened, someone cared. As their voices grew softer, Daniel dared to ask, "Your dream, to see the stars, to stand at the control deck, is it still alive?" Lyra's eyes filled with pain, but also a tiny spark. "I dream," she whispered. "But dreams kill too. Every night I dream. Every morning I wake. Still slave. Still nothing." Her voice cracked. Daniel reached out slowly, gently placing his hand near hers on the floor. "Then let me dream with you," he whispered. Lyra's lips trembled. For a moment she looked like she would cry again, but instead she gave the smallest nod, and in that nod, a bond formed. Fragile yet strong. A secret shared between two souls, one human, one alien, both trapped, both longing for stars. When footsteps echoed in the distance, they pulled apart. Lyra picked up her broom quickly, hiding her tears, hiding her voice. Daniel grabbed his tools, pretending to work. Two shadows again. But now, they carried a secret together, a bond that could not be erased. And though the world around them stayed cruel, Something new had begun. The bond between Daniel and Lyra was fragile. It lived in whispers, in stolen moments, in eyes that met and quickly turned away. Every day, the diary stayed hidden under his clothes. Close to his chest every night, her words replayed in his mind. For the first time in years, Daniel felt alive, not for himself, but for someone else. But the ship was not blind. Others began to notice. Soldiers who usually ignored Daniel started watching him. "Why are you always in the lower decks?" One barked, his eyes sharp. Daniel forced a laugh, saying he worked better near the engines. The soldier narrowed his eyes, not fully convinced. Lyra, too, felt the weight of danger. Her steps grew faster. Her eyes stayed lower. She avoided Daniel. During the day, afraid of drawing attention. But at night, when the halls grew quiet, their whispers returned. Every time they spoke, Daniel's resolve grew stronger. Every time she smiled faintly, he knew the risk was worth it. Still, shadows grew heavier. One evening, Daniel carried a crate through the corridor when he saw two soldiers blocking Lyra's path. She clutched her broom tightly, standing small. Before them, the taller soldier sneered, "Why so quiet, alien? Lost your tongue?" The other laughed, kicking the broom from her hands. Lyra bent down quickly, but her hands shook, her body trembling. Daniel's chest burned with fury. He wanted to run to her, to stop them. But he knew. One wrong move, and they would both be finished. His fist clenched around the crate until his knuckles turned white. Lyra picked up her broom silently, her eyes never rising. The soldiers grew bored and walked away. Daniel exhaled, but inside, his rage grew. He swore to himself that one day, she would not have to bow again. That night, Lyra's voice was heavy. "They hate me," she whispered. "They want me gone like dirt." Daniel shook his head. "No, Lyra, you are more than they will ever see." Her lips trembled. Then, "Why does no one see it? Why only you?" Daniel's chest ached, but he had no answer. All he could give was his promise. "Because I choose to see you, and I will never stop." The following days turned colder. A rumor spread among the soldiers. Someone said a worker had been sneaking around at night. Whispers of punishment filled the halls. Daniel kept his head low, but fear crept into every step. He began to realize their secret was fragile, like glass under boots, ready to shatter. One night, as Daniel adjusted wires near the stairwell, a voice cut through the silence. "You?" Daniel turned sharply. A soldier stood there, broad shoulders filling the narrow hall. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Daniel forced calm into his voice. "Maintenance, the pipes were leaking." The soldier's eyes narrowed, lingering too long. Finally, he stepped away, muttering, "We're watching you." Daniel's breath shook. He knew the truth. Time was running out. Sooner or later, someone would see him with Lyra. Someone would connect the pieces, and when that happened, both their lives would break. Lyra sensed it too. Her whispers grew more urgent. "Maybe you should stop, Daniel," she said one night. "Do not risk your life for me. It is not worth it." Her eyes glistened, begging him to let go. But Daniel only shook his head, his voice steady. "You are worth more than this ship. More than their hate, more than their rules. I will never stop." Tears slipped down her cheeks. For the first time she reached out, her small hand brushing his. The touch lasted only a second, but it was enough. Daniel's heart surged. She trusted him, truly trusted him now. But the universe rarely allows peace for long. The next day, Lyra carried water through the hall when a soldier blocked her path. He sneered, his eyes cruel. "You don't belong here," he growled, shoving the bucket from her hands. Water spilled across the floor. Lyra gasped and knelt quickly, trying to clean. The soldier grabbed her arm, squeezing hard. "Maybe we should end your misery right now," he hissed. Daniel froze at the sight, his blood turning to fire. His body screamed to move, to fight, to tear the soldier's hand away. But he knew. If he acted now, everything would explode. His heart pounded, torn between fear and fury. The soldier's grip tightened, Lyra's eyes filled with terror. And in that suspended moment, Daniel realized the danger was no longer rising. It was here, right now, standing before him. Daniel's body burned with rage. The soldier's hand gripped Lyra's arm tighter, her face twisting in pain. Every instinct screamed at Daniel to fight, to throw the man across the hall. But reason whispered, one wrong move and soldiers would flood in, both of them destroyed. So Daniel acted carefully. He stepped forward, forcing a tired laugh. "Hey, leave her. She's needed in the engine room," he said, pretending to be casual. The soldier glared. "Why do you care?" Daniel shrugged. "Because if she slows down, my work slows down. And if my work slows down, the whole engine slows down. Do you want the captain asking why?" The soldier paused, uncertain. Lyra's eyes flicked to Daniel, wide with silent fear. Finally, the soldier shoved her away, muttering, "Useless alien." Before storming off, Daniel's fists remained tight until the man disappeared. Lyra clutched, her arm trembling, her eyes glistening with tears. She whispered, "Why risk yourself? Why speak at all?" Daniel's voice was sharp but steady. "Because if I stay silent, they'll break you, and I won't let that happen." That night, their whispers turned heavy, urgent. "They are watching more closely," Lyra said, her voice low. "If they find us speaking, we will be punished." Daniel nodded. "I know, that is why we can't just hide anymore." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Daniel leaned closer, his heart pounding. "We can't wait for them to destroy us. We have to move first. We need to escape, at least for one night, to the control deck so you can see the stars." Lyra froze, her breath sharp. Her hands shook as she whispered, "That is madness, impossible. We will die." Daniel shook his head. "No, we will be careful. I know the maintenance cycles. The guards change every 4 hours. There is a window, short but real." Lyra's lips trembled. "Why do this for me?" Daniel's voice softened. "Because your dream matters more than fear, more than rules, more than them." For the first time, Lyra did not argue. Her silence was not rejection. It was hope, small and trembling. Finally, she whispered, "Then, we plan." The days that followed were filled with danger. Daniel studied guard movements, memorized patrol times, checked which doors required codes and which could be forced open. He stole a small key card from a careless officer, slipping it into his pocket when no one watched. At night, he shared each detail with Lyra in hushed whispers. Her fear never faded, but her eyes began to shine. Every step closer to the plan made her dream feel more alive. Still, the risk was unbearable. One evening, as Daniel marked another patrol cycle, Lyra grabbed his hand suddenly. "What if we are caught?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel looked at her and answered firmly, "Then we fight, but if we succeed even once, even for a minute, you will see the stars, and no one can take that from you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. A single tear rolled down her cheek, yet her lips curved into the smallest smile. The night of the escape arrived. The ship groaned softly as the cycle shifted, alarms ticking low in the distance. Daniel and Lyra moved like shadows, slipping from the lower deck into narrow maintenance halls. Every step echoed like thunder in Daniel's ears, but they kept moving. Lyra clutched the stolen keycard to her chest, her breathing sharp. They ducked into shadows whenever footsteps neared, pressing themselves against cold metal, waiting for silence, then moving again. At one point, a soldier turned the corner, walking straight toward them. Daniel's heart stopped. He pushed Lyra into a dark alcove, his arm shielding her body. The soldier passed by, grumbling about his shift, never glancing their way. Lyra's eyes widened in terror, but Daniel held her steady, whispering, "We're okay. Just a little more." Finally, they reached the stairway that led upward to the control deck. Lyra's breath shook as she looked up. "So close," she whispered. "So close to my dream." Daniel nodded. Just a few more steps. But before they could, "Move," a voice thundered from behind. "Stop right there." Daniel spun, his blood freezing. A soldier stood at the end of the hall, eyes blazing, hand already reaching for his weapon. Lyra gasped, clutching the diary hidden in her robes. The stairway to her dream was in front of them, but death stood. Behind them, Daniel's body tensed, his mind racing. He knew this was the moment. Run, fight, or fail. The dream hung in the air like fragile glass, one wrong move away from shattering forever. The soldier's shout echoed like thunder. Daniel's blood froze. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. For a single heartbeat, time seemed to stop. The beer. Stairway to freedom ahead, death standing behind. Then the soldier lunged forward, hand reaching for his weapon. "Run!" Daniel hissed, pulling Lyra up the stairs. Her small legs stumbled, but she followed, her heart pounding louder than the alarms that suddenly began to wail. Red lights flashed along the corridor. Sirens screamed, the whole ship waking in chaos. Daniel dragged her upward, every step heavy with fear. Behind them, boots thundered against the metal floor. Shouts filled the air, soldiers calling for backup. Lyra cried out, "They are coming, Daniel. They will catch us." Daniel's grip tightened around her hand, his voice fierce. "Not if we keep moving, not if we don't stop." They reached a junction, two paths splitting ahead. Daniel pulled her left, ducking into a narrow hallway filled with pipes. Steam hissed around them, hot and choking. Lyra coughed, her eyes wide with panic. "We cannot win," she gasped. "I will only drag you down." Daniel spun toward her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me, Lyra," he said, his voice sharp but steady. "Your dream is worth every risk, do you hear me? Every single risk." Her eyes filled. With tears, her body shaking. "I am nothing, a slave, a burden. Why do you fight for me?" Daniel leaned close, whispering fiercely. "Because you are not nothing. You are the reason I fight, the reason I live. Without you, I am already lost." For a moment, her trembling slowed, her lips parted, and in the red glow of the alarms, she looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. But the sound of boots cut the moment short. Soldiers were closing in, their voices barking orders. Daniel grabbed her hand again, pulling her forward. They raced through the pipes, turning corners blindly. Every second felt stolen, every breath borrowed. Lyra's body was weak, her steps uneven, but she kept going, fueled by his words. Still, doubt gnawed at her heart. What if they were caught? What if her dream cost Daniel his life? Her chest tightened with guilt, her eyes burned, but she ran on. Finally, they reached a sealed door, large and heavy. The words "Control Deck Entry" glowed faintly above it. Lyra gasped, her hands trembling. "This is it." Daniel nodded, pulling the stolen key card from his pocket. But before he could swipe it, shouts exploded behind them. "Stop! Hands up!" A group of soldiers stormed into the corridor, weapons raised. Daniel cursed under his breath. He shoved Lyra behind him, spreading his arms wide. Lyra clutched the diary to her chest, whispering, "No, Daniel, no." The soldiers stepped closer, weapons aimed at his chest. Daniel's voice roared above the alarms. "You will not take her." Lyra's heart cracked. Her dream and her fear collided inside her, one telling her to run forward, one screaming to stop before Daniel was killed. Tears poured down her cheeks as she whispered, "I cannot do this, Daniel. I cannot let you die for me." But Daniel turned his head slightly, his eyes burning with fire. "You are not letting me die, Lyra," he said, his voice shaking but strong. "You are letting me live. For the first time, truly live, by fighting for something that matters." The words broke something inside her. All her life she had believed she was worthless, her dream impossible. But here was a human, standing against armed soldiers, ready to give everything, just so she could touch the stars. Her breath caught, her body trembling, and for the first time she whispered, not in fear but in defiance, "I will not stop." Her voice surprised even herself. The soldiers blinked, confused for a moment, and in that moment Daniel swiped the key card. The heavy door unlocked with a loud click. He pushed Lyra through, slamming it behind them just as bullets sparked. Against the metal, the control deck burst open before them. Massive windows stretched across the wall, revealing the endless sea of stars outside. Galaxies glowed like rivers of fire, planets shone like jewels. Lyra froze, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "The stars," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I see them. I really see them." Daniel dropped beside her, his chest heaving, his arm bleeding from a grazing shot. but his eyes never left her. Her face, lit by starlight glowing with wonder, was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He placed his hand gently over hers, whispering, "This is your dream, Lyra, and now it's real." Behind them, the door shook as soldiers pounded on it. The alarms still screamed, danger still pressed close. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Lyra's impossible dream had come true. The control deck was a world of light. Stars burned across the black ocean of space. Galaxies stretched like rivers of fire, and distant planets shimmered like jewels. Lyra's breath caught in her chest. Her trembling hands pressed against the glass. Her wide eyes reflected the cosmos, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I never thought I would see this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel leaned against the wall, his arm bleeding, his chest heaving, but he could not look away from her. All the pain, all the danger, all the fear, it had been worth this single moment. Her face glowed with wonder, her voice filled with joy. For the first time, she was not a slave, not a shadow, not nothing. She was Lyra, a dreamer who had touched the stars. The pounding on the door grew louder. Metal shook as soldiers shouted, demanding entry. Lyra flinched, the sound dragging her back to fear. "They will come, Daniel. They will kill us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel staggered closer, placing his hand gently over hers, against the glass. "Then let them come," he said softly. "They can kill us, but they cannot kill this moment, this dream. It is already yours forever." Her tears fell harder, but her lips curved into a broken smile. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Not because of freedom promised far away, but because of freedom felt right here, in the stars. Suddenly, the door burst open. Soldiers stormed in, weapons raised, shouting. Lyra gasped, stepping back, but Daniel stood in front of her, arms spread wide. "Don't touch her," he roared, his voice filled with fire. The soldiers hesitated, their eyes flicking to the alien girl behind him, her face glowing with starlight. Something unexpected happened. Among the soldiers, one younger man lowered his weapon, his eyes fixed. On Lyra's tears, he had seen slaves before, but never like this. Never with such raw joy. Another soldier frowned, uncertain. For a moment, the room was filled not with hate, but with silence. Lyra's voice broke that silence, soft but strong. "Please," she whispered, "just let me look. One more moment, just one moment." Her words were not angry, not defiant, just honest. And something inside the soldiers shifted. Not all of them, but enough. They did not lower their weapons completely, but they did not fire either. Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. He saw it, the crack, small but real in the wall of cruelty. Maybe, just maybe, Lyra's dream had touched more than just him. Minutes passed. Orders came through the radios. Arguments broke out among the soldiers. Some wanted to drag her away. Others hesitated. In the chaos, Daniel leaned toward Lyra and whispered, "No matter what happens now, you won. Your dream is alive." Lyra clutched the diary to her chest, her tears wetting the cover. She looked at Daniel and whispered back, "No, Daniel, we won, I dreamed. But you believed." The soldiers finally moved forward, but slower, uncertain. One reached out, pulling Daniel back roughly. Another grabbed Lyra's arm, but she did not struggle. She lifted her head, her eyes still locked on the stars. Her lips whispered, "I saw them, I really saw them." Even as chains clicked back onto her wrists, her voice carried strength. Even as Daniel was shoved to the ground, his chest aching, he smiled through blood, because the stars still shone in her eyes, because her dream had come true, if only for a moment. And sometimes, a single moment is enough to change everything. From that night forward, whispers spread through the ship. Workers spoke of the alien girl who saw the stars. Some mocked, but others felt something stir in their hearts. If she could dream, maybe they could too. If she could see the stars, maybe freedom was not impossible. Daniel and Lyra were separated, but the bond between them did not break. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw her face lit by galaxies. Whenever she sat in silence, she remembered his words, "Your dream is worth everything." And both carried hope where before there had only been despair. The diary, hidden once in shadows, had become a seed, not just for Lyra, not just for Daniel, but for anyone who heard their story. A reminder that even the smallest dream, the weakest voice, the poorest slave, could still reach for the impossible. And sometimes when one human chooses to believe, the impossible can come true.